year, a lot of them are, thank you, a lot of them are a little bit different because they might have to be virtual, or some places are kind of conglomerating all of the REUs into one place or something like that. So our panelists, mainly Dr. Olafson, might be able to speak to that in a little bit, but they're available for pure, applied, computational, biological. If you're interested in it, there's a pretty decent chance there's an REU in it and you can do research in that area, or if you think you might be interested in it. So why should I care about these things? Well, first off, they're often paid. And depending on what a virtual one looks like, I'm not entirely certain how funding works, but I know there is still being money given out. So usually there's some kind of stipend, but it varies a lot by programs. It'll be, I think I did 2, and that was 8 years ago or something, and I got close to $5,000 for the 8 weeks I was there. So it's like pretty good. It's better than I would make mowing lawns in my hometown. You also usually get travel expenses and housing expenses and food expenses paid for in some way or another. Again, that might be different this year because we have, maybe they're virtual, maybe not. Also, another thing, they might pay for you to travel to certain conferences. So for instance, my REU that I did at Boise State paid for me to go to JMM when I was a senior, which is super cool, housing and flights. Mostly, they're important because they help you find or identify what kind of areas of research you're interested in. So if you don't know, the math that you learn in undergrad doesn't necessarily directly translate to the math that's on the cutting edge or what you're doing, what people are doing in the field right now. So this is a first taste at what the cutting edge is really like. And maybe most importantly now, it looks really good on a graduate school application. I've had some graduate directors even tell me that it's nearing the point of being a requirement. It's not, but having previous research experience is pretty important to get into grad school at this point, because it's just so competitive, even more so than when I applied, which was only 4 years ago. You also have the potential to give presentations and or get publications out of them. Depending on what kind of REU you get into. Like I said, they may pay for you to go give a presentation somewhere, or you might get a paper out of it, which would look fantastic to have a paper going into grad school already. There's some grad students who struggle to get papers out. So it just puts you one step ahead. Yeah. And also contacts, super important. It looks really good when you apply to graduate school that you have a letter of recommendation writer from a different university than the one that you attended for undergrad. Somebody that can speak to your research interests and ability. And you meet other grad students from other schools too, which will become useful in the future. You don't know, they might help you get a job somewhere or something. So how do I apply? So REUs are a little bit less standard than applying maybe for grad school or math jobs. It varies a little bit more. So universities often advertise their own REUs on their own websites. But usually the NSF website will list most of the ones, if not all of the ones that are NSF funded. And we have links to all of these things at the end and on the website. There's like basic searches available, but you can also download from the NSF website into an Excel file where you can search things maybe a little bit easier. So you have to pay close attention to the requirements and the criteria. It's a little bit different for every REU. Some REUs are looking for extremely qualified undergrads who are going into their last year, who already know exactly what they want to do. And some are looking for maybe sophomore level undergrads who haven't had any research experience, but are promising in the field for some reason or another. One caveat here is that an NSF funded program cannot traditionally accept international students, at least for funding. There's ways to get around this. So for example, like if you financially support yourself I was at an RU where somebody financially supported themselves and they were there doing research with us, which was awesome. You can also look into doing internships at national labs, which are usually more applied, probably. There's also the program called RIPS LA. I don't know much about it other than a lot of people that I've known in the past have done it and love it. So there's links to these things too. So what do you actually need for your application? This varies a lot too, depending on what RU you are applying to. But in general, you'll almost certainly need a transcript to show that you've actually taken the classes that you've said you've taken. You'll need some kind of personal type statement. Those might change. It might be like a cover letter or a personal statement or both, or maybe a research statement if that's a thing. They vary a lot. And then you'll definitely need letter of recommendation writers. So in general, you should always ask people at least a month in advance who you want to write you a letter. We're approaching some of these deadlines, so I hope you have if you're considering applying. A lot of these deadlines occur like middle of February, February 15th-ish. I don't know when NC State's is. I looked it up, but now I can't remember. Maybe it's beginning of February or something.
I'll talk about that.
Okay, cool. And so you'll need letter writers. Probably if you haven't done much research yet, it's better to get letter writers from people who maybe you've had classes with, who can speak to your academic knowledge and aptitude. But most importantly, you need to remember and know your deadlines. So you need to have, we always suggest a big spreadsheet where you have all of your RUs you're applying to and deadlines and how many letter writers, what you need to do, and where you need to submit, because that varies a lot too. Some places just have the submission on their page, on their website. Above all, keep organized. So make sure you have a spreadsheet, make sure you stay in contact with your letter writers. And here is a bunch of links to all of the things that we've talked about so far. So again, these slides are posted on the UUG website, which is in the chat. Outside of that, yeah, that's all I have. So we'll transition to Ben and prepare for the panel questions.
Okay, so I think we're going to start.
I have a couple of things to add and have a couple of slides too, if you want me to show them.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Or more like stuff about our RU. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm sorry there's a little dog barking in my back. So first I want to show you, and I have all these links as well in a slide, so you can get all these links, so we can just add them to your slide. I'll just send you the links. So this is a link for the NCSU RU program that we're going to run. It's called DRUMS, and it stands for Directed Research for Undergrads in Math and Statistics. So it's a joint program with the Department of Statistics. We're going to have 20 students on campus. And I'm going to go to a little bit what we expect, what they're going to do. As it was mentioned, you need to pay attention to RUs because all the RUs are different. So our RU require not only that you work in the summer, but that you keep working on your RU project into the fall semester. And so the goal here is that the RU students are going to write a paper. All our RU students from last year just went to JMM, and they all got awards for their posters, and they're all submitting papers. And so the whole goal of continuing into the fall is that you have more time to complete and submit papers. So a big objective of our RU is that you need to submit papers. So now, one thing you need to be aware of when you apply for RUs is that a lot of RUs funded by NSF have requirements of who they get. So it's a requirement for any RU funded by NSF that 75% of the students come from small colleges. 75% of students are in some way minorities. Can be small colleges, can be racial minorities, it can be females, It's pretty broadly defined. So when you come from a big school, you might have a disadvantage for some of these RUs because they're thinking, oh, you have other research opportunities. But don't get discouraged if you do not get into an RU, because there are a lot of other research opportunities. I have 2 or 3 NC State undergrads doing research with me pretty much continuously, and they're not necessarily all in RUs. There are research training grants that we have won in the math department, and they also have undergraduates conducting research and they also get paid. There could be people who have their own research grants and can have undergraduate students via research grants. So there's a lot of opportunities outside of the RUs. Don't get disappointed if you don't get an RU. Reach out and figure out if there's any other opportunities. Okay, so keep that in mind. So now our RU has a application deadline of February 15th, and a lot of the RUs have similar deadlines. So they're coming up pretty soon. So if you haven't applied yet, make sure you get started. Most of the RUs are advertised on math programs, and I'll go you there in a little bit. This lecture here takes a link to math programs. You can see our specific RU. So our students actually receive $6,000 for 10 weeks work. It's considered full-time work. So you are expected to not take classes. You're expected to not have other jobs. You're expected to do this full-time. And as was mentioned before, pretty much every graduate student that we admit at NC State have either done an RU or have conducted research with a professor. And many of them have published papers. So if you go here to our link, you can see what we require. So this is math programs, which is where you go in and apply. So we require a cover letter that's basically stating that you are interested in the RU, that you have looked at projects where those projects seems to be a good fit for you. You have to do a curriculum vitae, which is basically just stating what have you done, have you published other papers, what classes have you taken, what grades have you gotten, etc. It's not your transcript, but it's just an indicating of what other academic things have you done. You need a transcript, and an unofficial transcript is fine. It doesn't have to be an official transcript. You need a personal statement. Why is this RU a good thing for you? And then here we are requiring a mentoring letter from a local faculty. And that's because our RU goes into the fall semester. So we need to make sure that when you go to the fall semester, that somebody at your local institution is aware that you're still going to have that commitment. It can be your academic advisor. It can be somebody you're taking a course with. If you're already at NC State, that local faculty member could obviously also be me. And then you need 2 reference letters. So these are the things you need to submit. And so in addition to our RU here, I would give you the link to the RU we ran last year. And as you can see here, if you click on projects, you can see the 2 projects that was running. And to get an idea of what the students were doing, this is going to be updated very soon. These are the research presentations that the students gave at the NC State Summer Research Program. And there's also going to be a link to their poster that they gave at JMM, so you can see what they were actually working on. So we ran 2 projects last summer. We're going to run 5 projects this summer. If you go to this website, which is Office of Undergraduate Research at NC State, there's a link for all the RUs. I think that link was also on your previous slide, so I don't need to say much about it. But the one thing you can see here is when you participate in an RU in a specific program, there are also university activities. So there's a lot of activities that are done for all RU students at the entire universities. And so here is a list of some of the activities that are done at NC State. Here's a list of all the RUs that are going to be running at NC State. And if you look here, you can see some of the main coordinated activities. So summer move-in, safety orientation, a diversity workshop, a research ethics seminar, how do you apply for NSF graduate fellowship, how do you generate the poster? So NSF have a summer research symposium that everything is in. And right now, all of these may be online, they may be virtual. So NC State is opting for do what is called a hybrid program. So we are expecting to have the undergrad students on campus. We are expecting that each group, so you work in a group of 4, will be housed in the same apartment. So you're going to be together with the 4 people that you're going to be working with quite a lot, but that's to avoid contact outside of the groups. So each group will be housed separately. They'll be working in the group, living in the group to prevent other contacts. And then they'll get a classroom to work in on campus to make it safe. They'll probably have to undergo surveillance testing, and it will be free, but everybody who's on campus right now has to be tested every week. And that will probably also have to apply to our IU students. Now, we may have students who don't feel safe being on campus, so we're going to have a hybrid program. So some students may be on campus and some students may be off campus. Everybody's going to get the $6,000 stipend and travel expenses covered if they come on campus and housing covered if they're on campus. Okay. The other thing I wanted to show you, the last thing I wanted to show you was at the end here. I think it's on this page. If I go back here, at the end are some list of some of the activities that we're going to do. So typically, the first day you arrive, you will have an orientation of all the projects. You will have some seminar. Our teams works in such a way that each team has a graduate student working with them. So there are day-to-day interaction with the graduate student, and then also frequently with their mentor as well. So every day you'll work on projects. Every week we will have a research seminar, which can either have a guest speaker or you get to present your preliminary results of your research. We will have special dedicated topics to applying to graduate school, graduate fellowship, how to give effective presentations, how to write a scientific paper, etc., etc., etc. And then in the end, we will have the NC State Summer Research Symposium. Now in the fall, you're going to continue to meet every week with your team online and focus on finishing your project and writing a paper. Making the poster for JMM, all the students were just at JMM last week, and they are still meeting. They weren't supposed to keep meeting in the spring semester, but these papers aren't quite done. So I think both teams are still meeting and will continue meeting this semester as well, every week until they're done with their project. I think that's pretty much everything that I have to say. I have a lot of experience with IUs. I have been involved with IUs in NC State for the last 20 years, pretty much every summer. I am the director of the IU program now. And if you guys have any questions, either during this panel or later, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks so much for that, Meta. Now maybe we want to talk. Maybe the other panelists want to introduce themselves and talk about give just like a brief rundown of their RU experience. Like, did you do a pure RU, applied RU, where did you do it at, stuff like that. And then we'll take questions.
I guess I can go first if anyone else wants to.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay, so hi, my name is Sriram Venkat. I'm a senior now. And so I've done 2 kind of RUs in the past. My first program was in the summer of 2019, and it wasn't a conventional RU in that it was not a NSF funded one. So this was a program called the Summer Program for Undergraduate Research at Cornell. And so, but the application was similar to all the other RUs. It was on math programs, and you just had to fill out cover letters, similar to what Dr. Olson described for the NC State RU. The application was similar, but the funding came from a different source. You either had to get your own funding, or you could apply for some other fundings, but it was not through NSF. Anyways, this program, it was kind of a mix of pure and applied. So there was 3 separate groups that you could apply to and select which one is your first choice, second choice, third choice. And one of them was like very pure, one of them was very applied, and then one of them was kind of in the middle. I ended up doing the one that was kind of in the middle. It had to do with orthogonal polynomials on fractals. So like the Sierpinski triangle, and you can define polynomials on this triangle and see what you get out of this. Ended up being a very good experience for me. We actually just got a paper published out of it uh, that got accepted like last month. So even after the RU finished, we continued working on it, and we went to conferences like JMM and some other ones throughout like around here. And then last year, summer of 2020, I had a virtual RU, and this was with the UCLA Applied Math Department. So this was their computational and applied math RU. And so before the pandemic and all, the application process was before that. So they fully expected it to be in person, and then suddenly it had to be switched to virtual. So that meant like they didn't change any of the stipend or the other thing because it was virtual. I'm assuming that might not be the case now because they're planning on things to be virtual, maybe. So they might have readjusted things. But for us, they just gave us what they meant to before the pandemic hit. And so this program was quite different actually. What I mainly think the difference between an RU isn't a traditional one that's funded by NSF and one of these programs that are not, they're funded by like the university itself, I think is that you can get a little bit more, they look for a little bit more experience, prior research experience when you're applying to one of the RUs that are not funded by NSF. So what I saw was in the RU that was funded by NSF, they kind of started from the beginning of how do you do the research process. They started from the like literature review and read papers, and then you start on working on small sample projects, and then you build up to the eventual goal of what the RU is. But kind of for the Cornell RU that I participated in 2019, they basically just gave us a bunch of stuff to have read beforehand. They expected us to kind of know what we were doing before we even came to the RU. So I guess that it's kind of like based on how much prior experience you have, you can apply to some of these other programs. From my experience, I would say that it's always good to just apply to as many programs as you are interested in and as are available to you. Just because, unlike applying for colleges or grad schools, there usually isn't an application fee associated with these programs. So you can really just apply to as many as you want without having to worry about that. And as long as you can get stuff in on time, it usually gives you more options to decide between what you want to choose. And another thing you can do is before deciding which one you want to go to, you can talk to the professors in charge of the RU, and you can talk to some of the students. They usually have previous students' emails listed on their website where you can contact them and stuff like that. So I found that to be really helpful.
Great, thanks. Angela, Cole, whichever one of you wants to go.
I can. So I attended a 1RU at James Madison University in Virginia during summer 2019, which was the summer before my last year of undergrad. It was a pure REU. We did algebraic graph theory. So that program ran two math programs. So one was pure and one was applied. And we had 4 people working on each. I can go into a little bit more detail about what we actually looked at and how the experience was, but I think maybe like doing that during the panel questions would make more sense for me.
Cole, do you wanna?
Yeah, sure, I'll chime in. Let's see. So I think it was a sophomore. I did my REU at the Mathematical and Theoretical Biology Institute at ASU. This is when I was a sophomore. So I entered undergrad as a civil engineer because my dad's a civil engineer. And when I went to this RU, because I kind of like math and modeling diseases and stuff, I thought was interesting. And one of my professors encouraged me to apply to MTBI for a summer, and I got in. And I guess I can't exaggerate. It literally changed my life. everything that could have benefited me did benefit me from attending this REU. My current PI presented at the REU. They gave me a lot of money. I went to a lot of conferences. Networking was amazing. A lot of the professors I met out of this program are chief editors of the journal that I submitted my paper to after I finished there. And I now review manuscripts for their journal as a first year in grad school, which is, awesome. Connections with a lot of other people in your field. So I still do what I do now as I did in the RU program a long time ago. It was a complete home run for me. I fell in love with the subject. I'm still doing it now. I'm familiar with a lot of other people my age doing the stuff I do. I did a little program with the American Institute of Math this past summer. And when our first Zoom meeting, I recognized like 4 of the people there out of like the 20 that were there. Crazy, because it's just this random program being hosted by AIM with connections to NC State, and funny coincidence there. No, but great connections, great experiences. Definitely convinced me to go forward with getting a PhD in this kind of subject. And yeah, I could not have benefited any more from doing this REU. It was the best decision I made in undergrad. And I would convince anyone, even if they're not sure, again, money's money. At the very least, you get the experience of doing research in a field that you have an interest for. And that alone is enough of a reason to do it. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, I guess at this point, all of our panelists have kind of said something. So maybe now we'll take some questions from the audience. You can say them in chat, or you can, and I'll say them out loud. You can raise your hand too. Oh, okay, yeah. So Eric, that's a great question. Eric asks, what should we include in the personal statement?
So I would include some interest in the program. So if you're applying to NC State, look at the people who are listed to run projects. Very soon we will update the list because we're going to know who's actually going to run this summer's project. But why would you be interested in NC State? Why is the intersection between math and statistics of interest to you? What do you think you're going to do when you're done? We're not going to necessarily only accept people because they want to go to graduate school, but it's a good thing to write in your personal statement, even if you may not go to graduate school. You could think about, you don't have to come to our programs from a math background. You can come from other backgrounds too. But just in general, why do you think learning how to do research would be good for you? We're not as interested in that you worked in the grocery store or that you delivered newspapers or whatever else you could do, but really just think about, why is research important for you? The cover letter should mainly just state who you are, which projects, if there's multiple projects, you have to choose between which project you think you are the best fit to. So that should be tailored to every program you apply to. The personal statement doesn't have to be tailored. There could be the same thing for everything you apply to. So yeah, we just described how it differed from the cover letter. I got that in like 3 emails from other students asking me, what's the difference? And I think really the cover letter is just very short. It's just saying, here I am, I applied, I added all my documents, and I think I would be interested in projects 2, 3, and 5, or something like that, if they have numbers.
Okay.
This year, you may also be asked in cover letters if you can, you will be willing to participate in person or remotely. I could imagine that could be something IUs would ask for.
Yeah. Okay. Any of our other panelists have any comments on their cover letters or things they included?
When I applied, some of the schools I applied to basically just wanted a much shorter personal statement as the cover letter, and then formatted correctly, and then like a little bit more of an introduction to yourself, just to make like the format make more sense. So and some places ask for both. I think one or two might ask for just a cover letter. Some don't ask for a cover letter at all. It does vary a lot.
So something I did when I was applying is I would have kind of like a base personal statement that would have my whatever prior experience or why I'm interested in general topics. And then based on what RU I'm applying to, I write one or two paragraphs about that specific RU, maybe the professors involved, the projects involved, and why I want to work with them specifically. And if an RU asks for both a personal and a cover letter, then I would put the base like template part as the personal statement, and then like Dr. Olafson said, for the cover letter, have the more specific paragraphs in there, in addition to maybe some of the introductory stuff. And then if they ask for either or, I would just have the whole thing as that.
Okay, so maybe another good question is, okay, how much did you know, for our panelists, like, how much did you know about research before you did your REU? Like, had you like done research already? Did you have a lot of exposure to it? Or is this like your first time ever?
I had a bit under my belt. I had done a few projects with some of my professors in my mathematics department at my undergraduate university. Not a lot by any means. I mean, how much can you really do by sophomore year? I think that, again, depending on the RU, I think that the people who review application will know that. So I don't think it's a requirement, because actually, yeah, because a lot of people at the program that I did go to didn't have research experience prior to that. So it's not a requirement, but it does help.
Yeah, my situation was fairly similar. I went to an RU after my junior year and had already actually been working on research at my home institution for about a year before that happened. Since actually my undergrad institution had more research going on in general than the one that I attended an RU at, which was sometimes happens, is more likely to happen, of course, say students here at NC State, where there's a lot of research going on. But some of the people that I worked with, got to know, didn't have any research experience, first time doing research. It's, of course, a bit of a jump going from never having done research to doing full-time research, but they got through it. Intense first week, but still, if you haven't done any research, it's definitely not a problem.
I would say the majority of the students we accept have done very little research. One thing we always ask for is to let us know how much experience you have with programming, with MATLAB, with Maple, with R, with all these things that's often experienced, because a lot of the projects, no matter whether they're pure or applied, will use some kind of a computational tool. But it's not a requirement that you have learned it, but we teach you if you haven't learned it, okay? So that's okay. This year, another thing we did, since everything was remote, it took us some time to figure out how do we do a group project 8 hours a day on Zoom. That took some challenges. How do we figure out how to socialize? How do we figure out how to present things to each other? And now we know all of it, but it was a challenge in the beginning. But we managed to make through it. Everybody was happy then we managed to do it, even though it was remote and it wasn't ideal. There were some students who didn't have the right computers, so NC State shipped them a computer so they could work. There were a couple of kids who had Chromebooks. Chromebooks can't be used for MATLAB or R, or not very well. And since only NC State system administrators only administer NC State computers, it was easier for us to just send them a computer than trying to help them. They have to obviously send them back, but we managed to do things even though it's remote.
Okay. Anyone? You can just keep posting your questions in the chat, by the way. No one's posting any, so Cash is just sending me great questions that I'm going to keep asking. Oh, someone raised their hand. Do you want to unmute yourself? Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so anyways, literally before today, I literally never heard the word REU before. So I'm glad I got to get on this call and learn all the information about it that I could. But anyways, I'm from my experience, I'm a freshman and I don't have that much exposure into like higher level math. I'm only taking discrete structures right now personally, and stuff like that. What would you say, what advice would you give to a student like me in my situation who has very little exposure to advanced mathematics inside like a formal classroom setting, and who just now found out about this and probably won't have time to fill out the applications, if that makes sense.
So I would say don't worry about applying this year. One thing you can do, and I sometimes have freshman students contacting me. I actually have high school students working with me every summer. And this summer, our U group has a high school student working with them as well. But so what you can do if you're interested in learning about research, figure out what is your favorite topic and go talk to whoever is the professor that teaches your favorite topic. In Cole's case, that would be Dr. Lord. And then you go talk to Dr. Lord and you say, hey, do you have any research? And what classes do you need me to take before I can start doing research with you? So if it's me, I typically say differential equations and introduction to programming. And then you come back when you've taken these classes, if you're still interested in doing research, and say, hey, now I've taken these classes, can I now get a project? And I'll like probably get your project and make it work with some graduate students, because our graduate students, a lot of you here, always need help, because every graduate student have boring parts of their project that it's awesome to have an undergraduate student help them do.
I do know that it's super common in pure REU programs to expect students to have at least a little bit of exposure to linear algebra, and then like your basic calc classes. But going up to about linear algebra and knowing how like proofs work, know how to write at least a basic proof, which will usually be in some class or another. But then beyond that, a little bit more would be good, but they're not so picky besides just the basics.
So for example, in math biology, another thing we really care about is that you have taken biology classes. So if you're undergrad and already a freshman and say you're interested in math physics or math chemistry or math biology, make sure you take those topics classes, because it makes it a lot easier to do. If you don't know the biology, how do you know what math to do to solve the problem? So be all round, be well-rounded. If you're interested in an application, if you're interested in math statistics, take both math classes and statistics classes. It doesn't matter whether you major or minor. That's not so important. Like for biomath students, we like to see that all biomath students have taken biology. Do they have to have a minor in biology? No, but they need to know more than just the word.
One quick comment. So some of the people, or I guess it depends on the RU. The one that I went to, the first half of it was rapid fire courses. It sounds like a week was giving you material necessary to do research at a competent level in the latter half of the program. That included things like linear algebra, diffie-q, all that stuff. And there are people I know, because I helped some people at the RU that had not seen linear algebra prior to the RU. So yeah, just wanted to say.
Yeah, a lot of these RUs will have a crash course period where you just get up to speed on whatever you need to know to then do the project. But if you, you still have maybe a couple of weeks to apply to some of these RUs. So if you have the time, I would just recommend at least giving a couple of them a shot, as many as you can, really. Again, because it's free to apply, and if you get something, you might like it. And the other thing is, I would really recommend that if you have the time to talk to a professor, that you also start reading some papers in these fields that you're interested in, because that's a very good skill to have before starting research, is to be able to read the literature in your field and be able to understand what has already been done, so that then you can see like, oh, where can I improve here, or where can I explore this further.
I
Okay,
think there's
so-
another question from Eric.
Oh, did I miss it?
The hand is raised.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm in a weird situation. I recently transferred from a community college last semester, like when the whole coronavirus pandemic started. So that was fun. But I have a few questions about I want some general advice for applying to programs. I also have a specific question about finding reference letters. So at my previous I asked some people about like who should I pick for reference letters, since I've only been at a university for one semester. It's hard to find, a letter writer who'd be willing to, I think, would be able to write me a good letter. But I know there's one instructor at my old community college that I could use, but I wasn't quite sure, like, should I try to get a professor here who might not know me as well, but, is a professor at university, or should I look into another person at my community college to write me a letter for this RU?
I would do both. Having somebody at your community college and usually there's a lower limit of letters, not an upper limit. So have somebody at your community college. It could also be somebody you work with. It's okay even if you don't know people that well. We do realize that. If you in your personal statement say your story why you transferred it, we're not going to hold that against you.
All right, and do you have like any general advice for like what to say because I don't have that much research experience. I mean, I've taken all the core as in like I've taken linear algebra, I've taken differential equations, all the calculus, like in the proofs class.
I would just say you're interested in learning more about how math can be used outside the classroom.
Okay.
How do you translate taking classes to solving real problems, for example?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so earlier some of you mentioned that like the first few days were like a lot of like kind of almost like just learning the preliminary stuff. So kind of related to that, what is like a typical day at an REU like?
Well, because people who ran it recognized how short the time frame we were working with was, and so it was a little jam packed. Get up at 8, classes from like 9 to noon, I want to say, and then there'd be each day was dedicated to a crash course in a different programming language. Be like R, Maple, MATLAB, NetLogo, Mathematica, and so there'd be that for a couple hours, like a computer lab thing. Classes at the end of the day, 3 to 5, dinner, and then homework until like, depending on how quickly you got it done, 7 to 11. There's some people who stayed up very late because the homework was mandatory, and if you had problems wrong, you had to do it over again. It was a lot. It was a lot, but it was very, very good.
So we try to not have classes every day. What we do is the first week, we have a lot of stuff like introduction to MATLAB, introduction to R, introduction to Maple, whatever graduate students' arms we can twist to give those lectures. And then every week at NC State, every week we have a seminar, which is either a guest speaker, the RU speakers. After I've been there for about only a week, they have to make a 20-minute presentation. That's rough. So you don't know much about your project, but you're required to do a 20 minutes presentation. That's why all our students win all these awesome poster awards, because by the time they got to JMN, they've given like 100 presentations so they can do it in their sleep. But we really want everybody to be confident giving presentations. And then every week we have also these workforce activities like introducing to grad school, how to write a NSF grad fellowship, how to apply to grad school. We help you guys apply to grad school in the fall. If you have questions, apply to other fellowships. how to write a paper, how to give a presentation. But as Cole says, the days are really jam-packed. And the days we do research all day, it's like an 8 to 5 kind of thing at least. And then you have to get your poster ready in the end. You have to get your papers ready. So those days there's some cramming going on. But I think most students like it.
So my experience was a little bit different. It was still pretty jam packed in that the first week basically was our crash course period, and that's where this is. I'm going to be talking about the one I did 2 years ago at Cornell, and so this was since no one really has any background experience generally in fractal analysis. The professor there, he has written a book about it. So he, before the RU started, shipped us all his book, and then told us to have it read by the time we got there. And then there were exercises in the book. Every day we would meet. They would go over a couple of chapters of the book, and then we'd have a problem session, do the exercises with a graduate student. That was the first week. After that, we got to pick our projects and then start working on them. And it actually kind of lessened the workload a little bit. Contrary to what you might think, once you start your project, your workload actually got a little bit less, just because then we didn't have to cram all of these notes and exercises every day. We could just start, if it was programming, we could start doing the programming. If it was writing, looking at some theorems, we could start, working on the proofs and doing those. And so it was kind of a relaxed schedule for us. Nothing was really held tight. We would just go decide between ourselves and our groups when we're going to meet, start work throughout the day basically, and then come back to our wherever we're staying for dinner and stuff. The virtual RU was a little bit different as well, because again, they didn't plan for it to be virtual, so a lot of things got changed at the last minute, and basically we just ended up working by ourselves for a large portion of the time because of this. So in our groups, we would meet 2 or 3 times a week. We would meet, and with the professors or grad students that were helping us with the project. And then outside of that, which was like these meetings were maybe half an hour to 1 hour, 3 times a week. Outside of that, they would just tell us, here's what needs to be done. We would just work on it. And so for this RU, there was also a lot less of this type of crash course week. And what they did instead was, if you needed a brush up or a review on programming languages or something, they would hold separate Zoom sessions for that. And so if you were already familiar with those, you didn't have to go to them. And then they didn't really force any homework or exercises on us for the beginning portion. So a large part of it was we just had to work on it on our own time. And so, yeah, it kind of went a little bit up and down based on how much time you actually got to work, and then how much you got to talk with the other people.
My experience was also a little bit more like that, where like the first week still had crash course. I think we did about 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. Each of those like followed by a bit of time for us to talk among ourselves and like absorb the material, and then like lunch in the middle. We went through some basics. We went through some algebra and linear algebra stuff at the very beginning, like the first day or two. And then we started really just charging through the topic we did. We worked with these algebraic and graph theoretic objects called sand piles. So, and that's not something you generally know what it is. So we had like the main paper that describes them. We got sent a couple weeks before the RU occurred. So we read that and then went through lessons about this. And the RU I went to, the university actually doesn't have a graduate math students. So we didn't have grad students working with us. We just had our mentors, and we had like 2 mentors for our group of 4 and another undergrad from that university who was working there on a different grant. And then after that first week, it would be a meeting at least once every day, and then our mentors would be available for a couple hours, pretty much through the workday. And then, but we would be largely left to find what we wanted to work on. Sometimes that was together, sometimes that was on our own. And we would also do some activities like tea with the rest of the department once a week. And there was also a couple other REU programs. So sometimes all of those got together for some programs too, for things like explain your project in 90 seconds to like chem students, which is pretty interesting. And then we did do presentations to the entire department at the end as well.
Okay, I think we have time for like one more question. If anyone has a question, go for it. Do you want to unmute yourself or do you want to type it in chat? Here.
Hi, I had a quick question. I think Dr. Olofsson mentioned that some of the REUs at NC State were kind of like went into the fall and that you were expected to sort of finish writing a paper in the fall semester. I'm actually thinking of doing study abroad in the fall, so I'm not sure if that would make it difficult or impossible to sort of have that continuation from the work over the summer.
Probably not, because it's only like once a week and it will all be remote, so it doesn't really matter where you are. So, but it's something to take into account. So maybe you shouldn't apply for our program, but a lot of the programs, if you want to get to write a paper, it takes time to do. So expect that no matter whether it's officially listed or not, that you may have something you want to do in the fall. But it's not going to be like all your effort, because we also know you take classes, and wherever you take those classes, it's fine.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Well, in the interest of the time of our panelists, I want to thank all of our panelists again. So a virtual round of applause. I appreciate your guys' time for being here. Thank you to everybody who came. This will all be posted on the UUG website, which you can just Google. So if you have any more questions, feel free, whatever email you got to get this link, you can email that email, which I think is mine, and we can try to answer any other questions you have, or maybe we'll contact Dr. Olofsson or some of the other panelists in case we don't know the answer. But thank everybody for coming, and that was really fun.
Alrighty. Hopefully that was okay.